I need to get this off my chest, but it's bothersome how misinformed people are and how often people misconceptualize skill-based matchmaking and why the upper echelon players dislike it. And let me get these out of the way now before some snarky ass idiot comments in the section. I will acknowledge the fact that there are double standards regarding the Crucible and what connection preference players prefer. Not all players who want skill-based matchmaking have the intent of learning, but simply want games where they play against people like them. There's nothing wrong with that. A casual player who runs around shoulder charging simply prefers matching others who do silly and brainless plays, all in the fun chaos of the Crucible in 6v6. That's a completely valid feeling to have, and who am I to deny that, right? On the flip side, though, a semi-invested PvP player may want an environment to wind down and perhaps try different builds where they use weapons simply for the fun factor, not for what's objectively the best optimal gear to use. Out of spite, I put most of the blame for the disappearance of the competitive playlist on casuals because in my honest opinion, not only did they complain about a playlist that kept a considerable amount of their boogeymen out of 6v6, but that particular demographic of player had no business being in the mode. It was clearly marketed as an environment for invested PvP players to play in. Now, I'm not gatekeeping a playlist or anything of that sort, but if you went in that playlist with the intent of having a relaxed time just to complain, you have no one to blame but yourselves. Obviously, skill gating some of the top weapons in the PvP sandbox in comp at the time was a terrible idea and caused a lot of problems. In many ways, Bungie is to blame for the divide between the common gamer and the quote-unquote sweatlord. I could see why casuals winning comp for weapons like Recluse and Mountaintop because they were so unbelievably efficient in all PvE activities. Casuals got baited by Bungie into going in the comp, so kind of that's on them. I must also acknowledge that many good players complained SBMM out of the game and are trying to tell casuals it's for their own good when it's not really true. And one weird double standard I wasn't consciously aware of is the fact that good players tell casuals to play survival to improve. Meanwhile, those same players tell them to stay out of survival if they're bad, aka lobby balancing. It's supposed to be moderately skill-based matchmaking, but that's obviously not the case because I'm getting matched with and against players who are nowhere near my relative skill bracket, and the lobby balancing proves that. The common gamer or casual PvP player are usually in favor of skill-based matchmaking in the Crucible, especially in 6v6 modes, where it's supposed to be a social playlist. But sometimes they themselves don't know what they're asking for, and neither do good players either, as far as the connection preference goes. There is an argument to be made about skill-based matchmaking in modes like Rumble, Survival, and Elim, where those modes are kind of tailored for skill acquisition on multiple fronts. But in 6v6, this assumes that 6v6 is an environment where you can learn a lot of things, but it's way too chaotic in nature to learn anything of importance. So stop treating it as such. Pubs in any game are generally a low-stakes environment to wind down and mess around in. I personally treat pubs as a place to show off my tracking game with difficult weapons. That's not to say that casual players can't do this either. I often see players who are in favor of skill-based matchmaking. They often make the comment that skill-based matchmaking helps players improve. And it's a claim that the common gamer often makes. This statement does hold some truth to it, but only very little. I'll do my best to explain why. As far as Destiny 2 is concerned, skill-based matchmaking matches players based on relative skill to one another and then prioritizes connection second. Bungie has not really given us a clear definition on what skill is, so we have come to assume that the combat rating on Charles' report is indicative of that. Here is mine, for example. If you have a super low combat rating, that indicates you either struggle in PvP or don't play a lot. Usually the latter. Because there are a lot of good players that play the game that have a low combat score, but they don't play pubs or anything of the sort in the game. They just play scrims, right? Or private matches. Destiny 2 doesn't really present itself as a PvP game, so it's highly likely that people are going in with a more casual, laid-back mindset, which is why the average KD of the player base doesn't even break neutral or positive, which is at least a 1.0. Why are these numbers important? I outline these values just to put into perspective how casual the player base really is, and I don't know what other word to use. I'm not trying to be demeaning or defame people, but it's just the honest truth. If you are rock bottom on the relative skill spectrum, your matchmaking is bottlenecked with other rock bottom players. The way I see it is that a 0.5 KD player won't improve by playing other 0.5 KD or lower players. I imagine their 6v6 lobbies consist of players running around like they're like chickens with their heads cut off. So let's imagine a scenario where a player is on the Titan subclasses, running around shoulder charging and shotgunning the entire lobby and top fragging on the leaderboard. If they consistently see that they are top fragging, it will psychologically leave the player under the impression that shoulder charging and running around with a shotgun is a good habit, since their opposition is unlikely to punish them for making such silly plays. In short, you can make garbage plays that will work because nobody in your skill bracket has the mental capability or the mechanical prowess to punish you, so you are under the impression that what you are doing is a good thing. Then you test yourself in trials and then you get clapped because you were busy building bad habits in a bottleneck matchmaking bracket. Anyone can kill clueless players and watch their statistics climb and say they are improving, but in practice, they have not seen much progressive growth as a player, and it shows. I argue that you will see meaningful growth as a player the moment you are in the skill range of roughly a 0.8 KD and above. Now, I'm not saying playing against players significantly better than you is growth either, because that's far from the truth. But for meaningful growth, you have to experience a plateau in skill level which can be overcome with time. Like I stated earlier, the statement does hold some truth, but to a very minor degree in my honest opinion. Another misconception I want to address is that good players just want to stomp on potatoes or don't want to challenge. The first half of that statement, whether or not we admit it, it's kind of true. I mean, look at the background gameplay you're watching. You know, a lot of the gameplay that you see, it's not me actively trying. I'm literally talking to my chat and just playing on autopilot, right? So, the unfortunate truth is that there are players like that in all games. People just want to be assholes and farm stats. But those type of players are pretty uncommon as far as running into them goes. Most players who happen to be quite decent really just don't have anywhere else to evaluate and show off their talent during the week. It's almost like there used to be a ranked playlist for the quote-unquote sweat lords to play in. Don't really understand the fuss of a strong PvP player being present in their quick player trials lobbies when casual players are the same ones who complain comp out of the game when they had no business being in the playlist. If you watch some of my highlight streams, it's literally me doing comp and trials challenges, and you can even watch some old tournament gameplay there. I literally go out my way to play scrims against the best players in the game, do 1v1s against some players who at the time I stood no chance against, mechanically speaking. So don't sit here and try and ostracize players like me about not wanting a challenge, because if I had it my way, comp would have still been around, and I would have been playing that instead of getting team balanced in 6v6 on terrible maps. Content creators trying to make a video on a particularly weak weapon in a given sandbox are probably wishing for a bot lobby to farm to clickbait their videos. But the point being is that not all good players want to farm shitters. We don't find it engaging mercying most of our games. Casuals are the life force of most genres these days, and there's no denying that. But in the context of Crucible, even though it's mostly filled with the common gamer, why should it be catered to people who only jump in PvP to do bounties, or play for like 3 hours a week at best? There should be outlier protection for sure. I should not be matching with or against new light players and bottom of the barrel players. They don't have a good experience either way. They are against me and getting rolled, or they're getting lobby balanced on my team and getting rolled for the sole purpose of getting farmed so it balances out the lobby. Excuse my rant, but it's pretty tiresome seeing the common gamer champion for skill-based matchmaking to bottleneck their matchmaking so they can have a comfortable experience to still go incredibly negative in their matches. Meanwhile, players such as myself are trapped on Cheater Island with long queue times for the connection quality to never be good, and to be forced to use strong meta options just so we don't get mercied, and we get nothing extra for it. No extra rewards to compensate for having a worse experience. We have worse experience with skill-based matchmaking just to play for the same rewards as the common gamer who can snooze their way throughout a Crucible game. This is why players give the funny eye to the flawless pool concept in Trials. Players that are successful in Trials will have tougher matches to still be playing for the same rewards as a player in a non-flawless pool. In a loot-driven mode, any form of skill-based matchmaking trying to force an L on you doesn't make sense when you don't get anything special for playing out harder games. In short, be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. With skill-based matchmaking, the better you get, the worse your experience will gradually become. So you're not comfortable in your matchmaking bracket forever. And one last thought off the top of my head, people can't really get mad at good players for putting in the time. They put in the time. No one came out their mother's womb knowing how to play Destiny 2 or FPS games, right? A lot of the players you see that are quote-unquote sweat lords and god tier and fucking eat, sleep, shit, and breathe Destiny 2, they just happen to be good at the game. They put in the time. Alright? All those hours of me doing 1v1s against players I had no chance against, like Change Later, like Rico, right? Like all these players that I've done 1v1s against, putting hours into the game just to sharpen my primary shot or something, or all those hours I put into scrims, right, and getting rinsed. Like, of course you're not going to notice that. You're just gonna be like, sweaty player, no good, sweaty player. Like, you didn't know that I put in thousands of hours of practice to get to that point. And most good players pretty much share one common aspect, or anybody for that sort. When there's an activity of interest that you're doing or partaking in, it becomes more fun the better you are at it. And that's simply just the mind of how good players operate. The better you are at the game, the more your decision tree opens up, the more diverse you can get with your builds, right? And that's literally like why build crafters such as Cammy Cakes and, you know, Cool Cheese and people who just build craft in the game, they get good so they can use different builds and have more fun and expand their versatility as a player. That's literally the reason why build crafters get good at the game. That's the reason why people are good at anything. Your decision tree is open up so you have more options available, which means the game is replayable, or which means you're gonna get more dopamine hits in an activity that you're repeating. If you're a regular on the channel who's watched several of my videos, you know that I treat YouTube as an outlet for my thoughts, and rants are not excluded from thoughts. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'm probably gonna get a whole bunch of Destiny lover haters in the chat, you know, telling me to go fuck myself, or they're gonna send me death threats or something. You know, either way, life goes on. It's just me ranting. If you enjoyed the rant, or, you know, you have a particular piece of input you want to offer, feel free to leave it down in the comments. I'll interact with it regardless of what your stance is on what I have to say, because conversation is always cool, right? And do try to keep it civil in the chat. See you around.